Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for the launch of our new book, Ancient Egypt in 50 Discoveries. I'd just like to start by saying a few words of thanks before we begin. First of all, a huge thank you to all of the members and supporters who helped us produce this volume by donating to the 2023 appeal, and to everyone that's donated to the Publications Fund afterwards. Without your support, we really wouldn't have been able to produce this book. So an enormous thank you. And thank you for your patience while we've created it. I hope when you all receive your copies or purchase your copies, you'll see that the wait was worth it. I certainly think it was worth it. I also want to thank all of the authors and contributors. We have our two editors with us this evening, but this book was a collaborative effort with lots of different contributors, some of whom are with us this evening, some of whom might be watching this back on the recording, and many of whom we've worked with personally. So a huge thank you to everybody that's lent their expertise, time, and knowledge to this project. On that note, I'd like to just make a special mention of John Johnston, who sadly passed away just literally as the book was being printed last month. He wrote an entry on Hadrian and the cult of Antinous, and we are very sad and sorry to have lost John over the last couple of months. So I just want to make a special mention of John and a moment to remember him. Finally, I'd like to give credit and thanks to Julia Thorne, our publications manager, for her incredible typesetting of what I think is a landmark publication in the ES portfolio. It says a lot that when I saw the proofs of the volume, I rang Julia and said, "Oh, it doesn't look anything like an ES publication." And she was quite shocked. And I went, "No, that's great. That's exactly what we wanted." So I was really very pleased. And I do think it looks utterly incredible. And for anyone who's already purchased it, I hope you agree that this really sets a new bar for ES publications moving forward. So for this evening, I'm joined by Charlotte on your screen, who will be hosting this evening's online book launch. So it's a bit of an informal chit-chat questions. If you're attending live, then do pop your questions in the Q&A. If you're watching this back, then I hope you find the questions are useful and the questions that you maybe would have thought of. If not, then do keep the conversation going on social media. I'm sure all of us would be interested to hear your thoughts. We are joined, of course, on screen by our two editors, Dr. Stephanie Boonstra and Dr. Campbell Price. Stephanie, of course, former EES collections manager, Campbell, former EES chair, both of whom writing this while still in those positions, so we're still going to cling on to them for this event at least. And this evening, they're going to, I'm going to say, take us beneath the covers, which could be a euphemism. But I think it's fair to say, and I'm going to introduce our first editor this evening, because I think it's fair to say that the seeds of this project, this volume, were actually lovingly planted during the global pandemic many years ago, when Campbell, as chair of the Board of Trustees, pioneered our first ever ES online course. Campbell, I don't know if you can remember that, but I remember 10 weeks of facilitating your evening class.
Well, thanks, Carl, and good evening, everybody. It's really nice to be here. I do remember the idea, yeah, germinating to go with that theme, because I think at that point, as we went into the lockdowns, the EES had planned, it was certainly mentioned on business plans, to do more or to begin doing online courses. And then it just suddenly really took off. And I would say, and it's easy to forget now because it was years ago, the EES really should be proud of pioneering those kinds of engagement, those kinds of digital engagement. And so the first idea actually was a kind of an echo of an earlier book idea, the idea of having a story of ancient Egypt in 200 objects, which had done 200 museum objects. But then thinking about it, the EES is not just about objects, very clearly. It's about discovery, it's about reckoning with the evidence. And so the course was, as I remember, Ancient Egypt in 50 EES objects. So it was more object centered. And I really enjoyed doing those evening classes. They were arranged chronologically, so there was already a kind of structure. And then I think, well, you and I, Carl and Steph, discussed it. and we thought this would make a great book idea. And I'm super glad that it has turned out as well as it has, and I'm especially glad it is not. For anyone in the room who hasn't actually picked up a copy, it is not simply objects. There are findings that are not tied to museum objects, and I think that's really important. I don't know what you remember of it, Carl, the genesis of it.
No, I mean, I think it's interesting you've gone all the way back to that business plan, which I think Steph and I will vividly remember writing in, I think, September 2019 by
Brilliant.
a pool in Luxor. And it's
That's the
interesting
way to
that,
do it.
yeah, we really, thought online events were the way forward, but I think we didn't plan to launch them until about 2022. So it's really, I think I was saying to Charlotte earlier, seeing that sort of journey from an idea and how we see it through all of those stages. And I think just to bring Stephanie in as well, like the fact that we also incorporated that Egyptological Archive Skills School, which you ran in 2022, was supported by the British Council, but was a seminal moment where all of those archives within Cairo were brought together, and you trained 10 Egyptian students. And I think bringing that into this was amazing. I don't know if you want to say a few words, Steph, about that.
Yeah, I think so yeah, as you both mentioned, this was something that we had thought of originally, that this course that Campbell held for the EES could make a good and exciting book. And so we worked on that a bit, and then inevitably the crazy busyness of work and everything and COVID kind of got in the way. So we put a bit of a pause on writing it. And then when we were creating this Egyptological Archive Skill School in Cairo, we then thought, oh, a really great task for the participants would be to research using the EES archive objects that are in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, in Tahrir. And so that was a project that we had for them, and that ended up leading to in-person exhibition walking trail last year. I lost track of time. That was last year, right? Yeah. And then also we thought these would be perfect for the book. So that ended up then led to us slightly shifting the object list, but a lot of the objects that the students looked at were already on our list of objects that we wanted to feature in the book. But I think that opened our eyes to the fact that, hey, we don't have to write this fully in-house. Why don't we look to our colleagues throughout the world, and ask them for their expertise on various sites, objects, themes, and get them involved. And that's how we were able to not only get these 10 scholars involved, but other colleagues, including John Johnston. So yeah, it was really, it became this big collaborative project, and I think the book is much better for it.
Here, here.
So I'm going to jump in and ask, leading on from that, how difficult was it to decide, or should I say, limit yourselves to just the 50 discoveries of this book and how they would best represent the history of ancient Egypt?
Well, as we say in the introduction, Charlotte, you could write 50 books with 50 different discoveries. And it's all about, we use this metaphor of the kaleidoscope. This is not a definitive, this is the history of ancient Egypt. It is not that. It is a reflection of the many and varied ways the EES has led in trying to understand the evidence, which I think we're both really proud of. As Steph said, there are, experts in their fields reflected there. Of course, we could have asked different people, but everyone who contributed something distinctive, and everyone can be really proud. And it ultimately, when we were limiting, because we had many choices, there are practical things like having a balance in terms of sorts of material, time period, site. I don't know. Steph might want to have 100 things from Amarna. We couldn't
Yeah.
do that. And there's going to be a separate Senenmut book. So that was quite nice to balance things out and to feature things that were not objects, just objects.
Yeah, and I do think that our object list did evolve a lot because we would say, oh, we really want to include X museum, for example. So we think, oh, the best object that we could get um, from that museum to highlight a specific topic, it then makes a different object null. And so it was a bit of a puzzle to put it all
Yeah.
together, and the object list evolved a lot. I don't think until we submitted the final manuscript were we fully
We were
settled on
absolutely sure what was going to be in
yeah,
it.
yeah. But and then those objects then led to we've created these things called insets in between that kind of contextualize various themes or objects or materials or places. And so those are an integral part of the overall kind of narrative of the book, but they are also specific to the objects within the book. So that added in an extra layer of the puzzle.
I think that's
It's
really
very,
fascinating, though, the fact that you have these inset pieces and the real like range of artifacts and as Campbell said, like not just artifacts, but the discoveries that you got in there. I think give it a really different journey through what we maybe understand about ancient Egypt and how the EES has contributed to that generation of knowledge, rightly or wrongly. You know, it's a very transparent book, but it doesn't sort of labor any agenda. It just lays it out as it were. And I think you use this phrase quite a lot, especially in the earlier chapters, you know, kaleidoscopic. And I
mm,
sort of like, as I was reading it, because I'm one of those people that read it cover to cover, you know, I sort of felt like that kaleidoscopic range of it was so like fascinating. Like, and you know, someone with a background in Egyptology, like to see objects that aren't regularly featured, I think was really cool. Like, I mean, I don't even know if I'm saying this right, but like a hippocephalus, like, you know, all right, I have seen them. I've seen them in museums, but like it's not my area. Like I'm their family in Middle Kingdom landscapes. You know, this is different. And it was so nice to just be able to dip, you know, into these things, and then you know, as my usual brain would do, go off and research all these ridiculous things that
mm.
I'm now aware of. So I just think you know what's brought together in that range has been really cool and really different. So yeah, on that, do you have? I mean, I could not do this myself, so I'm asking a terrible question. Do you have a specific discovery from the book that you would say is your favorite or you find personally most compelling? Let's go
Stephanie,
Campbell
you go.
first.
Oh, well, okay. Well, gosh, we've not prepared this. I've not prepared this. Um, I think, I mean, I was just flicking through before. One really interesting story to me that I didn't know so much about was monuments in general from the site of Tanis.
Hmm.
And so our colleague Ahmed Nakshara has an entry there, and he's worked at that site for years. He knows it, and it's just a nice way of learning more. You know, we all hope we'll go out to Egypt and see these things in person, and it felt like just a nice hook. There are things in there people might be surprised that it was the EES that sponsored the finding of them. That's exciting. The fact that there are untapped, not untapped, I would say that specialists know that the EES has archives, say, about the sacred animal necropolis.
Hmm.
And I think that's, for me personally, having worked at Saqqara, when we were actually in the final stages of editing the book, there's a lot of cross-referencing. So it's like, look on page 25 for this, even though you're at the end. So hopefully that, yeah, gives that nature of the kaleidoscopic nature of Egyptian archaeology. So if I was pressed for something at the moment, I would say, yeah, finds from Tanis. But I also like the mention of the Sacred Animal Necropolis Archive.
Yeah, and of course you dedicated the book to the memory of Ian Matheson, of course,
Mm.
who you worked with at Saqqara. Steph, over to you. Are we getting ancient Egypt or ancient Amarna in 100 discoveries next, or are you going to pick a non-Amarna period discovery?
Well, I mean, should I choose this
Yeah.
one?
Yeah,
Hang on.
there she
Yeah,
I
is.
have
yeah,
the
Carl
same.
got a
Yeah.
matching one. I mean, of course, we can't forget Amarna. I mean, I won't let you. But yes, of course, some of my favorite discoveries are objects from Amarna. That is in part because while I was the collections manager at the EES, I was so privileged to be able to spend so much time in the Amarna archive. And in fact, I am back in London next Friday and have requested to see the Amarna archive again. I haven't had enough yet. So yes, obviously I'm a big fan of the objects from there. And another one of my kind of favorite discoveries is the mass-produced scarabs from the late period scarab factory, as Petrie called it, at Naucratis. I did my PhD on scarab production, and so I'm just fascinated.
We're both
Yeah,
doing it.
and
Yeah, it's
look at
beautiful
that.
design.
It's so pretty. It's such, I mean, Julia did such a phenomenal job with the typesetting. I was absolutely gushing over it. I was walking down the street and I had a first look at the proof and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so nice. But yeah, I mean, it's really hard to it feels like choosing like a child or something to pick your favorite discovery. Depends on the mood. There's so many.
Pick your favorite pet.
Yeah.
Charlotte, do
Well,
you have a favorite discovery from the book?
Oh, it's difficult, but I might have to be a bit like selfish and pick the Shabti I was looking at
A
because
beautiful shabty.
I've always loved Shabtis, and it might be a basic choice people might think, but I've always loved the story behind them, and it has a lot of references to the ES's own history as well as obviously the archival
Mm.
interest behind it, and yeah,
I,
so
I have to I
read
have
the
to
entry.
say, Charlotte, that was another of my favorites. The telegram
Yeah,
you mentioned. So, assuming people haven't actually got the book in front of them, tell the story. I had no idea about this until we read your entry. What
yeah.
is the story about the telegram code word?
Yeah, so yeah, back in the day when telegrams were the mode of communication most used, yeah, our code name was Ushabti, which of course is one of the names used for Shabtis, meaning sort of to speak. So yeah, it's got that fascinating, yeah, how the ES was using ancient language to define our own yeah, more recent history. So really interesting, and yeah, had a great time flicking through the archive trying to find different telegrams and reading and getting very much distracted reading all the different things people were sending to and from site and the office. So yeah, quite fascinating.
Excellent.
Carl, do you
Carl,
have a
do you
favorite?
have a favorite?
Yeah.
Um, I love all of it. I'm gonna say I have several. From an archive perspective, I really liked the piece on Ali Swafey's house. I just
Mm.
think that painting has been in our collection, donated by the daughter of Peggy Drower for a long time. I know Steph and I know it very well. And I just really, it's really nice to see it surface somewhere. It shouldn't just be appreciated by, those of us who have the privilege to see it in Doughty Muse. These things in the archive are incredible. Unfortunately, that painting is in desperate need of conservation. So I hope that boosting the profile of it will help us to raise the funds necessary for that. But really nice to just, not just situate Ali Swafey as an individual, but also, within a home, within a household. We know that he lived there with his family. I think that's really quite powerful. And I think from my own selfish perspective, I really like your piece, Campbell, on the Sphinx of Amenemhat III that has been reinscribed several times. And I really just also love the fact that when I read that entry, I was like, oh, you could have put this in several different chapters. I thought that was really
Listen, we
fun
had a
as a problem.
We
full
thought
debate
about
about
that.
this.
Yeah. We're like,
Yeah, but
where
I
does it
like that,
belong?
because I think it's probably the one moment within the whole book where it just shows that it's not quite as linear as we are often told. And in what we've presented, ancient Egyptian history is not simply this chronological thing. It's just the ease with which we present things, and we're all guilty of it. The book itself is.
Mm.
But I think that, putting that in there and making it very clear it's been reinscribed, I think it's just a fun way of playing with that chronology. So yeah, loving that.
Yeah, exactly. That is a point. I'm trying to look for an example of it.
Mm,
Um, you know, it's very difficult to actually pigeonhole particular sites into particular periods. And I
mm,
think for people who are new to Egyptology, and we really welcome those people, it's not that Giza is just the fourth dynasty and Oxyrhynchus is just the Roman period. It's really mixed up, and that was one of the fun things about working on, as Stephanie said, selecting
mm,
entries and constantly, yeah, trying to balance as one thing moved. It was like a game of Jenga. Is it all going to carry the story?
yeah.
And I think in the end, yes, it is. It is nicely linked. And the images, what a privilege to work with great museums who had their objects featured, the archive in particular. And yeah, things like Howard Carter's watercolors. Like that's the thing, well, more than most call people ask about.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Should we move on to another question?
I was going to say, sort of
Or no?
yeah, building on what you just said and how the Jenga effect, I suppose. What objects that didn't quite make the list or were missed out for various reasons that you sort of would like to highlight, like your honorable mentions, as people say? I don't know, Steph, would you like to
Oh,
start?
yeah, I've got an honorable mention. I feel like I shouldn't say it now because it is Amarna.
Ah,
But understandably, we had a lot of Amarna, and the EES worked at Amarna for close to 2 decades, and so there were a lot of amazing finds from there, like really groundbreaking things. But one object that would have been great to have been featured, but we couldn't fit for space, is an alabaster vase that was discovered in 1932 in the royal magazines of Amarna that is confusingly inscribed with Hatshepsut's name. So we're talking many decades, hundreds of years before the Amarna period. And Hatshepsut is not one of those royals who had a lot of what's the heirloom artifacts
mm,
because of the kind of erasure of her name and reign after. And so it's so weird that this vase was just found in a pit in the corner of a courtyard in the royal magazines. And it's a stunning piece. It's in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. But the EES has, the reason I know about it is because the EES has a plaster replica, which was conserved last year, the year
Mm.
before, thanks to the generous donations of EES members and supporters. And yeah, it's just such a weird, interesting piece, and I'd love to look more into that. So yeah, so stay tuned for Amarna and 100 EES discoveries.
that'd be a
I'll add an
great
entry
course.
for that.
I would have to agree with that piece. I got really excited, and I think everyone at the EES will remember when I spotted that at a wine reception, actually on the shelf before it had been conserved, because I was interested in Hatshepsut, and because I mean, you can't resist wondering the historical context, the
Mm.
political context. Akhenaten's a rebel. Does he look back and think Hatshepsut was a rebel too? And that's why he's got this, and her name has not been erased? And you think, what is going on? Obviously, the ancient Egyptians were far more aware of their own history than we might like to think we are. For me, I mean, such an important component of the EES's physical collections are the Oxyrhynchus papyri. Um, and I mean, there are incredible stories there. So to have to choose from all the thousands of fascinating texts, I think that was pretty tough. But I think the choice, I mean, I love the Charioteer's Papyrus because it looks lovely and pretty. Yeah, that was a tough call to try and extract things that you might have wanted to put in a second edition. Who knows? One other thing that I'm glad featured incidentally, it's an inset, I think Carl wrote it, was about living on site and living in tombs. And again, this is something you might have heard of in passing, maybe in association with Petrie. Yeah, Petrie in the 1880s. But God, this was happening relatively recently. People were doing it in the 50s and a bit later. So, yeah, that was a highlight for me as well.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is in the future we're going to get ancient Egypt in 50 more years to come.
Yeah, yeah,
Another 50 discoveries.
yeah, yeah.
A bracket record. I mean, I wouldn't say no to an ancient Amarna in 100 discoveries. I think that's
Hmm.
quite interesting. I mean, I'm going to skip through a couple of the questions just so there's time for other people to chime in as well. But I think, one of the things that makes this book so different is the fact that it has these inset pieces and that it's not simply focused on material culture. I mean, is there anything else, maybe Stephanie, you would say sort of sets this book apart from other books, maybe that are, an introduction to ancient Egypt, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think this book is special because it is maybe in title, it is a history of EES discoveries, but it's more than just a history of the EES. It's also kind of a history of British Egyptology. It gives information and context to the archaeology of a lot of the really important sites of Egypt, so Oxyrhynchus, Abydos, Amarna, Memphis. But it also goes in depth on different types of objects and discoveries and monuments. And you can really learn a lot about them from like a material perspective and even some art history. So I feel like because it is so many things, I'd like to think, and hopefully in a nice cohesive way, and not too long. I feel like anybody who picks it up can learn something new, even if you're an expert retired Egyptologist, or if you're, let me say, my family members who know nothing about Egypt. I hope that everybody can find it accessible and learn something, and in an enjoyable way.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. I found that. Campbell, what about you?
Well, just before we opened the doors of the webinar, Charlotte commented that people had come in off the street because they knew their dad was going to Egypt. And I think myself, having had a little bit of experience of the publishing industry and what general editors might want you to do, working on this book was really refreshing because it was, in the best way, Egyptologists being able to really go mad and share our own enthusiasms, our own peculiarities, and the endemic peculiarity of the whole business of doing Egyptian archaeology. Whereas, had it been another publisher, not the EES itself, I think we would have been really restrained and the idiosyncrasies I think we've just been talking about would have been edited out.
Mm,
And I'm really pleased because it's tough to pull together a book with lots of different contributors. I think it's got a really nice sense of self-reflection in it,
mhm.
which had it been, I don't know, a Thames and Hudson book, we wouldn't have gone into this amount of depth. So
Yeah.
I can't remember what the question was, but yeah,
The
if
the
you're a
rant is
non-specialist,
appreciated nonetheless.
if you're a non-specialist, I think it's really an excellent entry level. It's a gateway drug to Egyptology. And the best praise I can give it is not only does it have a snazzy golden cover, it is the kind of book I know myself when I was encountering Egyptology as a kid, if I saw that on a shelf. And that's why I'm excited to have it stocked at Manchester Museum. People are coming to see the collection, and it is the first book to feature multiple objects from Manchester Museum's own collection that is not a Manchester Museum book. So there, I'm really pleased about that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, both of you. This is Egyptology as written by Egyptologists without a sort of enforced agenda from editing companies, publishing companies. We have been able to um, lay it very transparently. This is where we are
Mm.
at in the field. This is how we got here, and there's also an element in there of where we're heading. And I think that's really important. That this will set a new standard for sort of the way we're referring to items. You make it very clear about how we discuss mummification and ethics around acknowledging previous labor and work on sites, but there's no sort of there's no bashing in here. It's laid very transparent.
No.
That these records are here in collections, and this is how they got here, and they're here to be witnessed, to be utilized. The memories that are in the collections can be interpreted in multiple ways, and you've done that with this multivocality of different contributors in a way that I don't find other books have done so successfully. This feels like you're being personally read to by each of the contributors. Maybe not mine, but where they've been done well, they feel
Oh
very,
no, Carl.
communicative. And I think, for me, that feels really special because I think as a reader, you don't often find, Campbell Price in your living room reading to you, or Charlotte, or Stephanie, or Ahmed
I'll pop up
Bechara.
in your living room if you want me to.
But, to have that, I think feels very special as a reader as you're sort of guided through these phases. And there might be some things you already know, and that's fine, that's comfort. But there's then things, as Stephanie says, that sort of maybe is a bit new and challenges you, and you go away and you find other references and find out those fun stories. And I think that makes this book really special. For me, if I was still teaching undergrad, which I unfortunately no longer am at the moment, this to me is a must read. This must be on their book lists, because if they don't have a copy of this book, they're only reading edited material. I mean, this is edited, but it's not got that angle on it to be for a specific audience. This is really broad reaching. I'm really truly impressed with it. I think it's far more impressive than I could ever have imagined it to have been.
Oh,
So I hope
Carl.
everybody who's already got it or is going to buy it, and surely everybody here watching this video back, whatever, must have at least one copy, if not multiple. One for notes, one for display. I don't know how people do
Yeah,
books.
see, I got a display
Yeah.
copy and another copy here.
Yeah, the one you
But
thumb through.
I do think this book really has it all. And really, I think that just shows through the work of both of you, Stephanie and Campbell, like pulling that together, and that narrative journey that you follow as you read through it. So, Charlotte, do you want to ask one more question before we open it up to the audience?
Yeah, I was going to say I think we've kind of answered all of them without asking the questions, but maybe I'll have a comment before we open. So yeah, if you are inspired by the book, obviously go and buy it. But also if you're inspired by obviously the work of the ES that is apparent throughout it, then you can get involved with our work today by becoming a member. So please do check our website to see how you can get involved. Yeah, to help our next 50 discoveries, possibly.
Yeah. I think I was just going to say that's a really important point, actually, is that none of these discoveries would ever have been possible without the efforts of crowdfunding and our membership since 1882. I mean, I think one of the things the book does bring out really cleverly, particularly in the introductory part, is how different British Egyptology has developed to other, let's say, national fields. This is very much non-governmental. It hasn't had that, soft power, cultural diplomacy aspect. Of course, there's always some aspect in there, but it's had that ability of reaching people all over the world. All these dedicated members who support the work that because they believe in it, but they believe in that charitable mission. And this book really is, a bit of a I don't know, a bit of in honor of all those members who, past, present, and future, who've made it possible for us to know this about Egypt's history. We wouldn't know these things about Egypt's history in this way if it hadn't have been for all those thousands and thousands of people since 1882 who've made it possible. And I think just moving on then to one of the questions we've got in the Q&A from, I may pronounce this wrong, so I apologize, but Kin Hiro, how many faces are included in the 50? Would we consider a face as an object? Which I think is a fun question, because I know when we were putting the cover together, we were all very much angling on, we really nice to have something with eyes, that sort of glares at you off the
golden and
So I don't know
Nice.
whether or
So,
not, Campbell, you've got
so
any thoughts on
well,
face.
can I jump straight in? Conjiro, hi. We are colleagues at the University of
Okay.
Manchester and are involved in a major interdisciplinary project to study the human face in culture and science. So thank you for joining this. Please do join the EES. I was going to say before Carl came to that, yes, it is it's a good insight into the makeup of British Egyptology, but it's also a good insight into the international nature of that crowdfunding. So there is, yes, material from smaller museums that don't tend to get much attention in the UK, but also internationally. So we're very proud to feature museums in Japan and Australia and in the US. It is a British led, historically, it's been a British led with Egyptian colleagues endeavor, but the people who have benefited from that endeavor are totally international. On the question of the faces, Kinjiro, there is a section about realism and portraiture, which is a reflection of some of my other work. And it's a theme. It's funny, and I will go away and think about this. The process of actually selling a book once you've written it is about what is going to leap off the shelf. And you cannot deny the human face. Go into any news agent, any shop, every magazine, every newspaper will feature a person's face,
Mm,
people on the front.
wow.
And it's a well-known thing in PR. You know, look at it. Two sides to every
Yeah.
coin. Um, so in some ways, I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical about featuring another golden mummy mask on an Egyptology book. But you know, I think there are lots of people in this in the Zoom just now who are already interested and are happy to buy into it and happy to find out more. But I would be keen to see how this book competes on a bookshelf of other titles,
Mm.
and just to see. I think there is traction in having some gold lettering and a mummy mask.
I love the gold lettering.
I love the gold lettering. I think I'm part magpie. But
Yeah.
I was I really pushed for it. I was like, if we can afford it, please can we
Yeah.
do it? And I'm so glad we did. But I tried to have I saw Kinjiro's question come through, and I tried to have a look through the table of
Mm.
contents to see how many faces. And sometimes it's really hard because I mean, there's the one entry that is Howard Carter's watercolors. If we went and counted every face in there, it would be a lot. Are we including animal faces? Because we do
Mm.
have animal faces in here too. I don't know. I'd say maybe half of the objects, a third to half of the objects have faces.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, and it's difficult as well with the way that faces are portrayed in ancient Egyptian art as to, it's
Yeah,
always frontal. I mean, like even the image of Guy Brunton is half faced,
yeah, yeah. How
You
many
can tell we
faces do you
angle it.
count in an archive photo? I
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
Mm,
lots.
yes,
someone
that's a
should
good
go
point.
through and count every single face in the book.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
Kinjiro can do that and come back
yeah,
and tell Campbell, and we'll find out.
We'll take that up with our research
Yeah.
project.
We should probably have in our book catalog, number of faces in each back
yeah.
volume. Yeah.
I'm sure AI
Very
can figure that out for us.
quick question from Catherine. Which is the oldest item included in the book? Steph, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, so we tried to have the book as I mean, as Campbell said, the ancient Egyptian chronology is not linear, but from what we can tell, the oldest object in the book is a rhomboid gray wacky palette. So this is from the site of Naqada, which such an important, very early Egyptian site. And all of these kind of quote unquote cosmetic palettes were found in burials at Naqada in the cemeteries. And Petrie, Flinders Petrie, I imagine most of you are familiar with him. He used these palettes as well as more famously pottery to kind of create a seriation, so to relatively date the objects, and then also then the tombs, burials that the objects were in based on their shape. So it's believed that this cosmetic palette, although Matt Safran, who is a contributor elsewhere in the book, his research says maybe they were more percussive instruments rather than cosmetic palettes.
Interesting.
But this one dates back to roughly 4000 BCE. We could have gone much, much, much earlier.
We could have included one of those stone tools. I think we
Yeah,
talked about.
yeah, we could have done Paleolithic stone tools. We could have spent time in the Neolithic at Merimna Beni Salama, where the EAS has excavated in the last couple of decades. But yeah, when you only have 50 objects, you then have to find some sort of
We've got to do
boundaries.
another 50 before and another 50
Yeah,
after.
yeah. Maybe 50 per millennia we should do.
I think also it was that limiting to like what is considered traditionally ancient Egypt rather than prehistoric
Yeah.
Egypt, which I think all of us, certainly all of us here, would agree that these are rather superficial boundaries, and it's certainly not something we would ordinarily want to sort of push. But I think you sort of covered that in the book by sort of, acknowledging that this is the sort of the state formation element in the first chapter, and you're sort of ending with the sort of introduction of sort of Greco-Roman rule and the advent of Christianity, which sort of, it's not a solid line at the end of the book. It's very much a sort of fading out of one period, let's say, and the introduction of another. And I don't think anyone's implying there's a year where everything stopped. What you've implied in the book is, it's a bit of a gray area. And it's those gray, messy areas that I think actually really excel in the book, because I think probably all of us here quite love the messy bits. Those bits in the middle, and a good intermediate period is good fun. That's all the fun part. And I think you've really put that through as well. Valerie's asked, was it important for you to have Egyptian contributors? And I think it's something that we've done across the EES. It's not just simply let's have Egyptian contributors sort of superficially. It's, let's invite everybody to be involved. Let's create a platform where everybody can contribute, where everybody can feel involved, particularly our colleagues in Egypt. I know, Campbell, you've already mentioned Ahmed Nakshara, but Steph, you worked so closely with the scholars on the skills tour, didn't you?
Yeah, and these were all, because not only is this book about 50 kind of physical items, so the objects and monuments, but it's also about the act of discovering. And the 10 scholars that we worked with at the Skills School are all people that work in or with Egyptological archives. So they had that unique perspective to really look at the actual discovery of these objects, as well as those 10 objects being in the Tahrir Museum. They had better access to them. So it wasn't so much that we said, oh, we need Egyptians in the book, which I mean, obviously we're talking about Egypt, so yes, we do, but that wasn't, we wanted to pick experts, and so we picked experts. And yeah, I mean, as Campbell mentioned about Ahmed Nakshara, like, is there any better person to write about Tanis? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. This is not about anyone, we're not helping them. This is absolutely because these are the right people to write them, and they're experts.
They were helping us.
Yeah. I mean, we're very fortunate to have this connection. And I think, the training events we run in Egypt, the conferences we run in Egypt, the networks we have in Egypt, to see those scholars moving right up the ranks, they're all, top of their field, the fact that they still feel connected to the ES and they want to contribute to a project like this is really special, I think, for all of us. And it's so nice to have those friends and colleagues reflected in the book. So yeah, it's always nice to have those people. We have one question from Adam, which says, should I legally change my name to Adam Henarton? No, please don't do that, Adam. I know that Adam's also messaged today he's having trouble currently getting the book. We know that some outlets haven't quite got stock yet, but please do keep it hotly anticipated.
No, it's working now apparently, so all good.
Oh,
Okay,
excellent.
good, fantastic.
Woo!
So one thing Adam has asked is about the discovery of Akhenaten's sort of unusual. I'm going to use the word portraiture just to infuriate Campbell. And I wonder, Campbell, whether you might want to say a few words just about Akhenaten, the way Akhenaten is depicted, and where that sort of features in the book as well, because I know it does feature in the book.
Well, Stephanie already mentioned the very striking Nefertiti head, unfinished, and for me, because this is a research interest of mine for some time, reading the reactions of John Pendlebury, who was the British archaeologist who led the excavations at Amarna in the 1930s, that discovered that head, more interesting to me than trying to puzzle out what Nefertiti looked like, which is impossible to know, by the way, is his reaction and taking account of how people have responded, as people do respond to depictions of the human face, is fascinating. So I don't think we labor the point too much. What was Akhenaten thinking? I mean, you've got to acknowledge the Amarna period was somewhat unusual in the totality of pharaonic history. Why does Akhenaten get shown at some periods like that? But I emphasize at some periods because there is pretty rapid change in a decade and a half.
Mm.
It doesn't start out quite as extreme as it becomes, and then it changes into something else. So I think Akhenaten is making an ideological, religious statement, and I can only flag the potential of yet another book from the pen of Campbell Price. Perhaps it is more about the fact by creating an image, you're not reflecting anything, you're creating something. You are making something real. So it has been said, art does not simply reflect the world, it makes the world.
Mm.
So that's all I'm going to say on that.
Well, we're stay tuned for Amarna in 50 discovered by
Yeah,
Stephen. I mean,
maybe
I will
Stephen and
say,
I will have a
in the book,
collaboration.
there's a great entry on Egyptian art by Edward Scrivens, our development manager. There's also a section on the Shrine of Parnahesi by Shima. And I just think that both of
Mm,
those together, I mean, as you say, Campbell, you've not, there's no laboring of the point, but, you can
mm.
read into it. And I think the book really does that sort of, it doesn't tell you what to think. It hand holds to
Yeah,
a degree, and then it's really about the reader coming back with their own interpretation. And I think it's not therefore not a patronizing book. It's relying on people to do their bit. To end, we've got a few minutes. Doug has asked, are there any of the 50 discoveries already in the Grand Egyptian Museum? I'm now questioning how many, because I'm not entirely sure quite what's been moved
oh, good
over. I
I
know,
question.
We
yeah.
know of
The
one that's in there because Campbell saw it. And
Yeah,
actually, thank God Campbell saw it because last time I saw it, it was at the Egyptian Museum in Tahrir. And then I'm sure, Carl, we saw it in Namek, but maybe I hallucinated that. And
quick
then
change to
Campbell
the
Campbell noticed it
location.
in Gems. So he that was a late catch, but it was the jewelry out
Uh,
of the tomb of King Jair.
yeah, you're right.
And yeah, that we know, well, I mean, I'm trusting you, Campbell. I didn't spot him there. Yeah,
I
but
think it looks good at the Grand Egyptian Museum, and maybe we can. Well, I don't know actually. No, I'll rephrase that. We don't have any of the Tutankhamun material in there, not related to his tomb, because of course that wasn't an EES-led find.
mhm.
But I think what is now in the Grand Egyptian Museum in the main galleries, the non-tut galleries, will stay pretty static. There are EES
Mm.
finds there. Apart from the JR jewelry, I can't think of anything.
Yeah, I need to go back. I don't think any other objects from the book are in gem. I think it's just the jewelry, but
I
maybe I'll use this as an excuse to go back and have a look.
Yeah, I think you're
Definitely.
right. I think the jewelry is possibly in gem. But the reason that most of the objects in Egypt in the book are still in the old Egyptian museum is because very conveniently, when Steph ran the Egyptological Archive Skills School, it was in 2022 when they were making the decision about what was moving. And so obviously for convenience, Steph selected EES objects that were not moving, so we knew when we ran the skills school they would be there. And I can say that all those objects, because we then ran the walking trail in the Egyptian Museum, have remained there. So they're now displayed very prominently within the gallery. So, for example, one of the highlight pieces in the volume, of course, is the very small but very famous ivory statuette of Khufu, the king of Great Pyramid fame, found by the EES at Abydos. Previously in the Tahrir Square Museum, sort of in a bit of a corner, but now very proudly presented much more centrally in the gallery. So if you do go back to Egypt and go to the old museum with a copy of this book, I can guarantee you will have your eye in place to go, I know which one are EES objects. And it's probably thanks to the fact that Steph spent many hours wandering around the museum going, that one's EES, and finding each one, thanks to Marwa and all the registrar team saying it's in this vitrine or this display. And being able to put them pieces. And there are, now I've got it in my head, there are so many honorable mentions that should go in there. You know, Buttercup's not in there. I don't know, is the Hittite
Buttercup?
the Crock of Gold in there?
Yeah, no, the Crock of Gold isn't in there. That's another one that would be
Yeah, so
amazing.
that's for your Amarna book.
Yeah,
I feel
So
stay
it was
tuned.
Buttercup.
Yeah, I feel that needs explanation for our listeners.
Yeah, so Buttercup is I don't know how you'd call it, a figure of a calf that was found at the sacred animal necropolis. It has the actual bull skull, but the body is just made of a sort of ghetto plaster sort of frame. But the excavators affectionately called it Buttercup, even though it must have been a male calf. But you know, hey, no judgment. But it is a very beautiful piece, and it was on the walking trail. But out of a selection process, we couldn't include everything not in the book. I think it's currently in conservation. But yes, if you do go to the Egyptian Museum, hopefully that piece is there.
Build me up,
Maybe,
Buttercup.
well, don't look at Buttercup, you won't find it under that. But I think Steph, you maybe could say a few words about the Hittite amulet from the Crock of Gold, which is
yeah, that is that's such a great story of discovery as well. So it's this happened the 1930 to 31 excavation season at Amarna. They were digging in one of the houses in the north suburb. They said the house was they called the area a slum, which is very modern terminology for an area of an ancient city. But they were digging it up and they found a clay vessel that had been buried under the floor, which that's not uncommon. They found those a lot. But this one wasn't empty. And in fact, as they poured it out, they even write in a very popular memoir that like gold piece after gold piece and silver came tumbling out of this crock of gold, they called it. And there was a little statuette, very, very small, of what they called a Hittite god. And it's made out of like gold, silver, and electrum. And they said that he was guarding over this hoard. And the thought is that because the pieces within this were all they weren't, none of them were finished objects other than that little Hittite deity. The rest were kind of mangled and stuff. So they were kind of raw or reworked pieces of precious metals that then could have been reworked into something else or used as payment. And so the excavators thought it was like a robber's hoard, like someone had stolen precious metals from other places on the site and then hid it, and then for some reason never got to go back to it. But interestingly, at the British Museum, they have the silver from the hoard, and it is on display in a gallery that you would never think to go in originally, and I couldn't find it again if I had to. But they're doing analyses on the silver now, and so hopefully we'll find out more about where the silver came from and why it was buried under a floor. But this tiny little Hittite deity is on display at the Egyptian Museum in Tahrir. Again, we had to get help to try to find it because it is so small. And that is a big museum with a lot of big stuff. But yeah, it's just such a weird little story of discovery. The crock of gold.
Yeah, and that's our own. I think, that there's a nice point to end on is that even in the process of finding out about the discoveries, it is a discovery of your own. So I think everybody who reads it is going to become a sort of discoverer. They're going on their own adventure, their own exploration to discover more about these objects. And I think, tracking down these 50, you've probably tracked down another 50 just in the process. So I'm looking forward to ancient Egypt in another 50 discoveries, or part 1.2, is Amarna in 50 discoveries or something. I think it's going to be really fun. Just for me to say thank you everyone for attending this online book launch. If you haven't yet got a copy of the book, please do go out. It will be hopefully available in all good bookshops, and even the unspeakable ones online. You can always find links via the EES website. So please do go along. If you are an EES member, we do offer membership discount codes via the website, so check on that as well. If in doubt, or if you are struggling to get it, please do message us and we'll find a way of getting a copy to you. And if you're passing by our London office, drop by. Always happy to chat about it. We do have some copies on display there. And just to now, thank you, Charlotte, for organising the book launch this evening online. And huge thank you, of course, to Stephanie and Campbell for joining us online this evening. Please do go on social media, talk about the book more. Please spread the word. Please ensure that if you know any undergraduates, they must have a copy of this book. It's absolutely imperative. So thank you, everyone. And thank you again.
Also, yeah. And for those maybe doing early Christmas shopping for people.
Yeah. And I just want to quickly say that it was such a labor of love to create this book. And it was very nice to be able to work with my EES colleagues. I'm still going to call you my colleagues, even if I'm not there at the moment. But it was such a joy to create. And I just really hope that anyone out there reading, whether you have your own copy, whether maybe it's in your library, that would be lovely. I just want other people to enjoy it, and it would be lovely to hear what you think about the book. Unless you hate it, then please keep it to yourself.
Please don't tell us.
I don't need to know it. But yeah, I just hope that we kind of created this, birthed it, and now we would like to share it with everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Beautifully put.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your night. I am going to raise what's left of my orange juice to the successful launch of Ancient Egypt in 50 Discoveries, a new bar in the publications portfolio, and I look forward to many, many reprints in the future.
Inshallah.
Fingers crossed, inshallah. Yeah.
Inshallah.
All right. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.